I recently came across a clip of a young woman, only 23, crying uncontrollably as she pointed to faint lines on her forehead and insisted she was already aging. She spoke as if something catastrophic had happened to her, as though the natural process that every living person goes through had singled her out unfairly. What was even more unsettling was the flood of responses from other young women echoing the same fears, sharing stories about finding their first grey hair or noticing tiny changes in their skin. The collective anxiety felt intense, almost as if they were confronting the idea of mortality for the first time. It highlighted a growing pattern among young women, a deep, disproportionate fear not of being old, but simply of getting older, of watching birthdays pass and interpreting each one as a loss of worth instead of a sign of a life unfolding. This fear isn't about graceful aging later in life. It's about women in their 20s feeling as if their value is slipping away in real time. Many are making serious, expensive, and sometimes irreversible decisions driven by panic over a process that is universal and unavoidable. Being afraid of aging doesn't make the process disappear. It only drains energy that could be used to actually live. Time moves forward, regardless of our feelings about it. The real choice is whether to spend precious years obsessing over that movement or investing them in experiences and growth. Yet for many, obsession has become the default. Psychologically, this anxiety isn't appearing out of nowhere. It's shaped by a culture that places enormous emphasis on youth, especially in how women perceive their worth. Social media intensifies this pressure by presenting a non-stop stream of polished images that constantly reinforce the idea that younger is better. Every scroll becomes a reminder of someone who seems slightly more attractive or more successful at turning appearance into attention. Instead of accepting that youth is temporary and building qualities that strengthen over time, many feel compelled to fight the clock itself. That resistance fuels an entire marketplace eager to sell the illusion that time can be paused. The modern comparison environment is relentless. Before the rise of visual platforms, most people measured themselves against a relatively small circle. Now the reference group is global and algorithmically optimized to showcase the most flattering versions of others. People end up comparing their everyday reality to someone else's carefully edited highlight reel. Subtle, normal features that would once have gone unnoticed are magnified into perceived flaws. Young women who are objectively youthful begin to see themselves as already declining, grieving the loss of youth while they still possess it and missing the chance to enjoy it fully. An enormous industry thrives on this insecurity. Countless products and procedures promise to delay or reverse aging, marketed with persuasive language that frames fear as empowerment. The message suggests that starting anti-aging routines as early as possible is a form of self-care, turning normal development into something that requires correction. Preventative treatments have become common among people who are barely out of adolescence, not because of necessity, but because anxiety has been carefully cultivated. As a result, many naturally attractive individuals undergo alterations that can distort their features, gradually replacing uniqueness with a standardized aesthetic that mirrors trending templates rather than personal identity. Beyond the physical changes, there is a deeper psychological layer. The dread of aging often reflects a fear of losing relevance, attention, and externally defined value. When self-worth is built primarily on appearance and validation from others, it becomes fragile and time-sensitive. In contrast, qualities like skill, character, knowledge, and meaningful relationships tend to expand with age. Someone who invests in these internal dimensions experiences aging as evolution rather than erasure. The face may change, but the substance underneath continues to grow, providing a stable sense of worth that is less vulnerable to the passage of time. There is also a striking contrast between natural aging and heavily engineered attempts to resist it. A face that shows signs of life lived can carry a distinct kind of beauty, especially in a world where artificial uniformity is becoming common. When many pursue the same cosmetic ideals, authenticity itself becomes rare and noticeable. Procedures intended to create a younger look can sometimes produce an artificial appearance that draws attention in unintended ways. While attraction is complex and influenced by many factors, genuineness and confidence in one's natural state often communicate a sense of ease that manufactured perfection struggles to replicate. Aging also brings gains that are easy to overlook when the focus remains fixed on appearance. As people move through their 20s, 30s and beyond, they typically develop clearer judgment, stronger emotional regulation, and a deeper understanding of themselves and others. Experience refines decision-making and helps distinguish fleeting excitement from lasting compatibility. Careers, friendships, and partnerships have time to mature, creating stability and perspective. When these areas are nurtured, later decades can represent a period of strength and clarity rather than decline. Many misunderstand how attraction and partnership actually function over the long term. While youth can capture attention, sustainable relationships depend heavily on compatibility, shared values, emotional steadiness, and the ability to build a life together. Focusing exclusively on appealing to those who prioritize youth places anyone in a competition that inevitably favors the next younger contender. Shifting attention toward cultivating depth and seeking partners who value that depth changes the entire landscape, emphasizing qualities that endure instead of those guaranteed to fade. The economic forces behind aging anxiety are significant. Entire sectors profit from keeping people uneasy about natural changes, wrapping sales strategies in the language of empowerment and self-investment. Most interventions require continual upkeep, creating a cycle of repeat spending that benefits providers far more than consumers. None of this means that every cosmetic choice is misguided, but the normalization of aggressive preventative measures among very young adults points to a culture where fear is being monetized on a massive scale. Social dynamics add another layer of complexity. Much of the pressure to maintain a certain appearance comes from peer comparison as much as from attracting romantic interest. When appearance becomes a competitive arena, individuals feel pushed to escalate their efforts simply to keep pace. Opting out of that race requires a deliberate decision to prioritize other dimensions of identity, a step that can feel risky in an environment that constantly reinforces visual competition. In reality, each stage of adulthood carries its own strengths. Early adulthood is often marked by experimentation and uncertainty, while later years tend to bring sharper self-knowledge and direction. With time, people accumulate resources, perspective, and the capacity to pursue goals with greater focus. Those who invest in health, relationships, and meaningful pursuits often find that their sense of engagement deepens rather than diminishes. The fear of aging frequently masks a deeper concern about reaching the future without having built anything substantial, a concern that is best addressed through purposeful action rather than cosmetic resistance. A more constructive approach begins with accepting that aging is unavoidable and redirecting energy toward what can actually be preserved and expanded. Skills, character, and connections compound over time, offering returns that physical youth cannot match. Choosing partners and communities that appreciate these qualities reinforces their value. Questioning marketing messages that thrive on insecurity helps reclaim financial and emotional resources. Looking to examples of people who have aged with vitality and purpose can provide a practical model for what long-term fulfillment looks like. Ultimately, the central issue is not the appearance of wrinkles, but the presence or absence of enduring substance. Everyone will experience physical change. The critical difference lies in whether those years are accompanied by growth in areas that outlast appearance. When identity rests solely on a fading attribute, aging feels like disappearance. When it rests on accumulated experience and contribution, aging becomes transformation. The most effective response to the fear of getting older is to build a life rich enough that its value does not depend on looking the same forever.